1917, it was here in Fatima, Portugal, that 3 shepherd children claimed to have shared a miraculous vision of the Virgin Mary.
It's the only time in the history of Christianity that messages announced in advance a miracle.
Under intense scrutiny, they would accurately foretell the devastation of World War II, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union, and even their own mortal destinies. But one secret would stay carefully guarded for more than 80 years. Finally, in the year 2000, the Pope revealed this prophecy, and to this day the world remains enthralled by the miracles of Fatima. Cross this threshold to places of mystery. Fatima, Portugal is one of Catholicism's most sacred sites. Each year, millions of people come to the basilica, known as the Sanctuary of Fatima, to pray to the Virgin Mary and to pay homage to the shepherd children of Fatima. It was May 1917, and World War I was devastating Europe. Far from the battlefields, in the tiny village of Fatima, Portugal, 3 young shepherds, 9-year-old Francisco Marto, his 8-year-old sister Jacinta, and their 11-year-old cousin Lucia dos Santos, were tending their flock when a vision appeared. A beautiful woman bathed in brilliant white light. Father Cristinu, a local historian, tells their story.
On the 13th of May, Our Lady appears to the children. She doesn't identify herself to them, but the children truly think she was the Virgin Mary.
The apparition told them they must return to this very spot on the 13th of each month for 6 months, during which time she would reveal the purpose of her visitations.
Though very young, the 3 little shepherds were touched by the message they received from the lady.
The Virgin Mary instructed them to tell no one about her visit, but Jacinta, the youngest, could not hold back.
When she arrived home that day, Jacinta says, "Oh, Mother, today I saw Our Lady." It was difficult at first for people to accept that the apparitions were true. The first to doubt them was Lucia's mother. When she heard about it, she became very upset, and she even punished her own daughter, Lucia.
The same held true for Jacinta and Francisco's mother. According to their brother João Martu, in possibly the last interview given before his death in May 2000, he recalls what happened.
Our mother scolded them. She said, "What kind of good saints are you to see Our Lady?" And my father used to say, "Let it be, woman. Great is the power of God."
Compelled by their vision, the 3 children returned to the pasture the next month as the Virgin Mary requested. Word of the divine apparitions was dividing the community. Some vilified the children as blasphemers.
During that time, there were people who threatened them, saying that they would punish them. In those times, if someone asked if I belonged to Jacinta and Francisco's family, I would just say, "Me? No!" because I was afraid that they would also punish me.
And yet, still others revered the children as saints. Month after month, the curious crowds grew, placing the children in the center of a vicious struggle for power. Government officials became alarmed at the town's growing religious allegiance and saw the children as a threat to their domination over the church.
The mayor declared himself against the apparitions and tried by all possible means to stop people from joining in. But it became impossible. It wasn't possible to stop the crowds that were continuing to grow.
The crowds concerned the church as well. Monsignor Guerra, director of the basilica, explains.
The church had to be very careful, even though it was children, because children can be manipulated or even have delusions. With apparitions of supernatural phenomena, we might believe that the person could be mistaken or that they are perpetrating a fraud.
The local priest disputing the apparitions threatened the children with eternal damnation if they would not admit their lies. But the children were steadfast. They insisted that they were seeing and speaking with the Virgin Mary. On the third visit of July 13th, the Virgin Mary gave them a message which had to remain a secret.
The message of the so-called secret consisted of 3 parts. After the Virgin asked them if they were willing to accept the sacrifices that God wanted to send them, Our Lady then showed the secret's first part, a vision of hell.
In her published memoirs, Lucia describes the vision.
Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire. Plunged in this fire were demons and souls in human form, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating around in the conflagration.
The Virgin Mary's message continued with the second part of the secret.
This war is going to end, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pius XI.
The papacy of Pius XI began in 1922 and extended into the year 1939. During this time, Hitler came to power, and Japan invaded China. These were the sparks that ignited World War II, just as the Virgin Mary had predicted.
The second part also included the announcement of the Virgin. To prevent this, I shall come to request the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart. If you do what I ask, people shall have peace. Otherwise, Russia shall spread its mistakes.
The children had never heard the name Russia before. They thought it was a wicked woman in need of conversion. Of course, Russia was at that time involved in a dramatic communist revolution, which had banned religious devotion. James Hardiman, former skeptic and Fatima novelist, now sees a clear and prophetic connection between the children's message and global events.
Mary said that Russia would spread its evils all over the world, and entire countries would cease to exist. And of course that happened. They vanished behind the Iron Curtain. But then Mary also prophesied that this could be reversed by consecrating Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary.
In 1984, the Pope's call for atheist Russia's return to God would coincide with Mikhail Gorbachev's rise to power. 4 years later, Gorbachev would become the first Russian president to meet with the Pope, just as the Soviet Union began its rapid disintegration. It now appears that this sequence of events was predicted by the children of Fatima.
Fatima is the only time in the history of the world that current events, current affairs, political substance has been included in the messages of Mary.
It seems now that the 2 secrets predicted 3 cataclysmic events: the rise of communism, World War II, and the end of the Soviet Union. But the children told of a 3rd secret, and Mary's order that they keep it to themselves. The responsibility for that 3rd secret would subject the children to terrible threats and stretch their courage to the breaking point. When we come back, the war of nerves and the incredible vision that stunned thousands. Here in Fatima, Portugal, Mary had twice appeared to 3 shepherd children and entrusted them with a secret prophecy. But the thought of a divine message being kept secret, particularly by 3 young children, did not sit well with authorities. On August 13th, the local administrator, Arturo de Oliveira Santos, kidnapped the 3 children on their way to meet the Virgin Mary. He hoped to disappoint the crowds who had gathered. He also wanted to learn the final secret.
On the 13th of August, the mayor of this region, who was a very bad man and completely against the church, came here full of power and took them. He kept them there on the 13th and 14th and on the 15th. He thought that if they weren't there at the field by the time of the apparitions, that all this matter would end. So he kept them locked up.
In an effort to learn the secret, the administrator threatened to boil each of them in oil, but the 3 children courageously maintained their silence.
What's really amazing to me is the children's sincerity. Because the children must have really been convinced of the reality of God. I think this is the most moving thing, especially because they were children.
When the children were finally released, they immediately returned to the pasture. The Virgin Mary again appeared. Jacinta and Francisco's brother, João Martu, gives his first-hand account of that day's events.
They were facing an oak, and Lucia was talking, but I couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. I said to myself, I can see nothing there, and so neither can they. And that's how I thought.
In fact, Lucia was appealing for a sign, a miracle for all to see that they were telling the truth. The Virgin Mary heard her plea.
After the first apparitions, people were asking for Our Lady to create a miracle so that all may believe. In fact, the Virgin promises a miracle, which was to happen on the 13th of October of that year.
Lucia's mother continued to get mad at her because she thought she was still lying. Lucia said that it was the truth and said that Our Lady was going to make a miracle that everybody would see. And her mother would say, "More lies."
October 13th, 1917. It was a cold, rainy day. An expectant crowd of over 70,000 filled the pasture. All eyes were on the three shepherd children, waiting for them to summon a sign from God.
People came here to watch the miracle and said to us, if the miracle happens and we can see it, then you speak the truth and we'll believe you. But if nothing happens, unfortunate for you, because you bring us here with a lie, and so we will beat you.
By noon, no miracle had occurred, and the crowd was growing restless. Then, suddenly, the rain stopped, and Lucia cried out, "Look at the sun!" A local newspaper reporter vividly described what happened next.
The sun looked like a plaque of dull silver, and it was possible to look at it without the least discomfort. But at that moment, a great shout went up, and one could hear the spectators nearest at hand shouting, "A miracle! A miracle!"
The sun was whirling round and round, with intense movements and different colors, looking like it is going to fall onto people.
My parish priest was there, and he said that the sun detached from the sky and came down towards him. He threw himself on the ground, convinced he was going to die.
Then suddenly one heard a clamor, a cry of anguish breaking from all the people. The sun, whirling wildly, seemed all at once to loosen itself from the firmament, and blood red advanced threateningly upon the earth as if to crush us with its huge and fiery weight. The sensation during those moments was truly terrible.
Lucia's cousin Maria was a small child when she witnessed this event.
Everyone was afraid when the sun appeared. People kneeled down, and everybody asked Our Lady for forgiveness. They thought Our Lady brought them there to die.
The sun then returned to its proper place in the sky. 70,000 witnesses were awestruck by a vision no one could explain.
It's the only time in the history of Christianity that messages announced in advance a miracle to be worked several months later so that people could come to see it. It's a very significant thing.
Everybody was completely convinced that because of this marvelous thing, the facts of the apparition must be true.
The miracle of the sun sanctified the pasture as holy ground. The events had a dramatic effect on the shepherd children. Francisco spent most of the days following the miracle in solemn prayer. He said that the Virgin Mary told him he would soon be called to heaven. Suffering from pneumonia, he died on April 4th, 1919, at the age of 10. Jacinta passed away 10 months later from influenza at the age of 9. And Lucia, the only remaining survivor, joined the Order of Carmelite nuns at the age of 18. From the sanctuary of this convent, she alone held the third secret of Fatima. In 1930, the Catholic Church accepted the children's visions as a true miracle. 1 year later, Francisco and Jacinta would be credited with another miracle. In 1931, at the age of 16, Maria Santush was stricken with Pott's disease, paralyzing her from the waist down. After enduring years of tremendous pain and torturous, futile medical remedies, she prayed to Francisco and Jacinta for help.
I was 36 years old. That's when I started praying the novenas. For 15 years I prayed the novenas. One day, I started to feel my feet tingling, which was very strange, because I could never feel my feet. Then there was this voice, a clear voice of a child, and the voice told me, "Sit up, you can do it." I said to myself, "Oh my God, am I sitting? Is this possible?" I was. On the 80th anniversary that Jacinta died, I said, "Oh, little Jacinta, it's been 80 years today you flew to heaven. Please don't forget this sinner." I had already tried many times to raise myself up, but I was never able to do it. And on that day, I raised myself up. I firmly set my feet on the ground. And I said to myself, "Oh, it doesn't hurt me. My legs are good. I am going to walk."
Her doctors could not explain her startling recovery. Maria's case was verified by the Vatican as a true miracle. Still, there remained the matter of the third secret, and the only surviving witness to Mary's appearance more than 8 decades ago. On his recent trip to Portugal, Pope John Paul II returned to Fatima to beatify Jacinta and Francisco. It was the second step of a complex and lengthy process that may eventually lead to sainthood. Though she will not be eligible for beatification until she dies, their cousin Sister Lucia, 92 years old, was there as well. Amidst the joy of the occasion, one question nagged at the massive throng of worshippers and journalists. Would the third secret at last be revealed? On the podium stood 2 frail souls, the only ones with the power to disclose the third secret of Fatima. When we come back, an astounding revelation. It was 1917 when a trio of children in Fatima, Portugal, claimed to have received 3 messages from the Virgin Mary. 2 of those messages, including predictions of World War II and the rise and fall of Soviet Russia, were revealed early on. The only surviving child, Lucia dos Anjos, had told no one the contents of the third secret. But in 1947, when Lucia became gravely ill, her bishop ordered her to write it down. Lucia did as she was told.
The third part of the secret was taken to Rome at the end of 1957. Sister Lucia had told the Bishop of Leiria that it would not be made public before 1960. So the world was expecting it to be revealed in 1960.
John the 23rd opened Sister Lucia's letter, which detailed the third secret, in 1960. And those who were there say that tears poured down his face. And he folded the letter up, put it back in its envelope, ordered it to be resealed in the archives, and said, "This is not for our time."
Over the next 40 years, other pontiffs would also read and conceal the secret. Fearing the worst, some speculated that the secret predicted a nuclear apocalypse, or a crisis of faith that threatened our collective mortal soul. The only ones who truly knew remained sheltered behind the walls of the Vatican and the walls of a convent. But on May 13th, 2000, the anniversary of Mary's first visitation to the shepherds, Pope John Paul II broke the 83-year silence.
A bishop in white makes his way with great effort towards the cross, amid the corpses of those who were martyred. He too falls to the ground, apparently dead, under a burst of gunfire.
According to the Catholic Church, it is a clear reference to the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II himself, which had also occurred on May 13th in 1981.
Pope John Paul II was going through St. Peter's Square, standing up in a Jeep on May the 13th, 1981, the anniversary of Mary's first appearance in Fatima. A woman held up a painting of Our Lady of Fatima, and the Pope bent down to kiss it. At that moment, the assassin pulled the trigger, and the bullet struck the Pope, but because he was bending down, it missed all his vital organs. They rushed him off to hospital, and while he was in bed, it had really come to him the significance of the date. He was convinced that Our Lady of Fatima had saved his life.
But questions remain. Why did it take so long after the 1981 assassination attempt to reveal the secret? How can one explain the fact that Mehmet Ali Aşkı, the Turkish gunman who shot the Pope, told prosecutors at his trial back in 1985 that his attempt was connected to the third secret of the Madonna of Fatima? How he knew of the secret's contents remains a mystery. Many speculate that there is more to the secret than has been told. Yet no single revelation will ever remove the mystique that surrounds this place and the miracles of Fatima.